In this video, we are going to give you a quick tour of the default interface in Godot 3.1 and more importantly compare it with Godot 3.0. Why it changed, how it changed, we are going to look at that right now. So here we are in Godot 3.1 and I loaded a project so that we have a base to work with. If I go to Godot 3.0 with the same project open, you can see that the theme itself looks about the same, but there were important changes in the default layout. So in Godot 3.0, you have the file system tab that takes the entire left column by default. This is the tab you use to browse the assets and files in your project. Then part of these files might be scenes, like the one you can see right in the middle here in the viewport. We're on the 2D viewport right now. And so with a scene loaded, the scene tree displays on the top right of the screen. This is the list of all the nodes, all the building blocks of your games loaded into that scene, or that this scene contains. Right below the scene tree, when you select a node, if I select one, for example, the music player, the inspector displays all the properties available in that node. And it allows you to edit the settings, the properties of that node. Then besides that, right next to the scene tree and the node one, you have the import tab that allows you, when you select a texture or a file that you can import in Godot, you can change its settings, the flags that Godot is going to use to, for example, for a texture, make it repeat, allow it to repeat, the compression level, etc. Selecting a node, again, you also have the node tab right next to the inspector, which can list the signals, messages that nodes can send to one another and that you can catch in your code, or the groups, a tagging system that you can use there again in your code. You have a toolbar at the top of the viewport and a bottom panel that is going to give you contextual bits of interface that you can pop in and out of the editor. Now onto Godot 3.1. There have been changes to the default layout to accommodate to the way users, most of them at least, use the editor. Before we get started looking at it, just know that if you go to the editor menu and editor layout, you can customize this layout. We're going to see how in a second, but you can also then save that layout and assign a shortcut to it. You can see I have a shortcut assigned to the default layout. You do that, assigning a shortcut, by going to editor settings and to the shortcuts tab. So if you want to change the default layout, if you don't like it, if you want one that's more like Godot 3.0, you can do that. You have the scene tree in the top left, still with the import tab right next to it. Right below it, you have the file system tab. So the reason why you have them next to one another is that it's common to drag and drop scenes, nodes from your folders and to drop them into the scene tree to load some, for example, a camera in this case. So now they are close to one another. Then on the right side, you have the inspector that takes all the space, the entire column, instead of the file system tab. The reason being that we spend most of our time editing the nodes in the scenes instead of working with the file system tab. Plus, Godot provides some features to quickly load scenes and files, GDScript files in particular, by pressing Ctrl-Shift-O and Ctrl-Alt-O respectively. You can then search for a script or a scene and quickly open it in the editor. So you don't have to use the file system as much as the inspector here. The node tab is then hidden behind the inspector because we don't get to connect signals that often or to set up groups. Instead, again, we spend most of the time working with the inspector. One last change I should mention is about the bottom panel at the bottom of the screen. If I expand any element, any chunk of the bottom panel, we now have a little icon in the bottom right to maximize this interface. So you can now maximize the debugger, the animation editor, the audio tracks. Let's talk about customizing the editor now. To do so, you have to use the three dots that you find at the top right of Dockers here. So by clicking on one of these, you can change the position of the Docker that is active right now. For example, if I want to change the position of the scene Docker, I'm going to click on the three dots to its right. And I can then move it to the left here. If you have a really wide screen, this can be nice to have the scene tab here on the leftmost of the screen, or to have it to the right of the file system tab. I can merge it with other Dockers. When you see a gray box in the dock position info, I'm going to click on that, and now it's merged with the file system that became a tab. And I'm going to put it back to the start position. Now, once you've customized the layout, so say I move the scene tree at the bottom right of the screen. Once you've done that, you can go to Editor, Editor Layout, and save the layout to save it. You name it, My Layout, save, and you can then find it in the list of editor layouts. You can see it under the default one now. Now, I mentioned that you can assign a shortcut to the editor layout. You can only do so for the default one, which I've done because for videos, we have to reset the layout. But if you are working with a custom layout, chances are you won't be changing it all that much, so you can leave it as is. I'm going to go back to the default layout. That's it for our quick tour of the default editor layout in Godot 3.1. We are not done just yet. In the next few videos, we are going to look at the changes that were made to specific areas of the UI, because there's been a lot of work on it in this version. We're going to start with the inspector that got entirely rewritten, that is now much more flexible, pleasing to the eye, usable. You'll see it's pretty great. Then there's the file system tab that has been remade from scratch as well, that now offers a split view and that gives you a much better tree-based layout. We'll try to look at every major change, leaving aside some paper cuts that are still important though, because you'll see using the editor, it's now a lot more pleasing to work with. And so we'll see one another in the next one.